What's up, lovely researchers? Welcome back to another video. It's Kevin. Today I got a special guest, Cheenu.
Hey everyone, we're here in my lovely hometown of Austin, Texas, and we're going to be talking a little bit about my experiences as a UX researcher, as well as some things that I've been working on in the conversational AI space and enterprise UX space.
Cheenu, tell me about how you got into UX research. I know you told me a little bit. I think the viewers would love to hear your story as well.
UX has never really been on my radar when I was an undergrad at UT Dallas, my undergrad years. I was a cognitive science major, but my focus was on cognitive neuroscience and computational modeling with the intent of going towards more of an academic route, since I was really fascinated by how the brain works, especially how it makes decisions and reasons, working memory, decision-making, and reasoning. I remember it was the second semester of my senior year, and it was actually snowing up in Dallas, and it was also the career fair too. I bundled up, I had all my resumes ready, and I stormed out, no pun intended, to the career fair. And I talked to a bunch of recruiters. There was one particular recruiter that actually saw my resume and said, "Hey, you're cognitive science, you should look into user experience." And I was thinking, UX? And just like many other people out there, I had a very faint idea of what UX was. I used to think it was glorified graphic design, and I was always wondering, why the hell do they need people from my background of cognitive science and psychology in this field? And so I started reading up online about what user experience is about, and for the first time in a long time, I had that spark. I was really fascinated by how much psychology and science was involved in design, and that it was as much of a science as it was a quote-unquote art. And one of the companies I applied to was this company called Me+U. It was a digital marketing company in Dallas, and they were looking for a UX architect intern. I learned how to build wireframes and sitemaps, and then from there, I was just more curious about the field. I was particularly curious about where does psychology fit into design, like where are the principles and everything. My plan was to always do the master's program at the same university. And this time I was going to do the human-computer interaction concentration within the master's degree. And it was the best decision I've made because I feel like I've gotten a good solid foundation on psychology and also how to conduct research studies. I also got a good foundation on design principles too, and ethnographic research with a lot. I learned a lot of great things. I actually got my second gig, which actually kickstarted one of my niches in the field of UX, which is in conversational AI or conversational design and chatbots. I went up on meetup.com and I looked up a bunch of UX meetups, one of them being Austin UXPA.
And User Experience Professionals Association.
And then the other meetup was called PsychTech ATX. It was at that meetup where I would meet my soon-to-be manager for my new gig, and he and his business partner were starting a new startup in the personal finance space called Olivia. The moment I expressed interest, he actually said, "All right, so we're going to give you some exercises. There are no right or wrong answers. We just want to see your thought process."
So at this point, was it an interview then?
Sort of, you could say that. And so I created storyboards and prototype personas on paper to kind of illustrate the challenges people have with money and how they think, how they perceive it. They were really impressed by how I was able to translate very theoretical academic stuff into more like how does it apply practically in the real world. So the next step was they wanted me to do a presentation on the importance of behavioral economics for the startup. The first draft of the slide deck I made was very dry, very academic. When I presented it to the first draft to my manager, he was looking at it, he was like, it's missing something. He actually told me, think about how you would present this to somebody in business. And I let it sink in. And then as I was driving back home, in the middle of the ride, in my mind, I had this epiphany. I was like, wait a minute, I know exactly what I was missing. The storytelling aspect. I was being very technical with it, but I wasn't really talking about it from a storytelling aspect.
Do you remember how that epiphany came about on your drive?
I was so used to thinking very academic in explaining the concepts, but not so much about kind of industry related, so to speak.
So thinking about why is it important for them to know this as well?
And the whys and how it really applies to the everyday person. Just because I was explaining behavioral economics as a concept doesn't mean that I have to be very technical and just explain a bunch of terms. It's not really a class. This is a business.
Yeah. Cool, so you got this new gig at Olivia. That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about that.
Olivia is actually a chatbot that provides advice on how to save money in various areas like grocery shopping, eating out, clothes shopping, travel. The scope was pretty big. I would create what is called a conversation map. So think of it as like a flow chart of how the user would interact with the chatbot, like, at one point of the conversation, and how the user would progress through the conversation depending on which options they selected.
And how did you come up with the possible options that people could pick?
From a design side of things, the physical design side of things, we had to think about the screen real estate space. It's designed like like your typical instant messenger, except you're interacting with this chatbot.
So you don't want long paragraphs.
Exactly. So you really had to think about the number of characters per chat bubble. You also had to think about the number of chat bubbles per conversation segment. Because this chatbot wasn't a NLP-based chatbot where you type in a response, it was actually more of a rule-based chatbot where you select options, predetermined options to progress through the conversation.
And NLP stands for natural language processing.
Yep, we wanted to reduce friction when it comes to interacting with the chatbot. We didn't want the users to think about what to say to the chatbot. We wanted to have them actually go through the conversation. So that was the reason why we took the approach of creating predetermined options throughout. So with
video games? Or,
yes. So exactly. Like with think like Mass Effect or the old school text-based adventure games where you select options to progress through. The Witcher 3 is also a great example. When it came to designing the options, we had to think about how many options to provide. And because we didn't want to have too many options where the users feel overwhelmed, Hick's Law, too many options, too much time. But we didn't want to have too few options, like only one option. It makes users feel like, there's
constraints.
There's constraints. Exactly, constraints. The other part of it with the choices was that there needed to be an exit option as well too. If the tips provided by Olivia aren't helpful at that moment, or if they're busy at that moment, then there's an exit option to leave the conversation too. So we didn't want users to feel stuck in the conversation. That was part of the UI part of it. And then from the user experience side of things, when really thinking about the actual content in that, we had to think about it from the perspective of what it feels like from the users to how they feel about money. Money is a very, very sensitive topic. And people don't like to really talk about it in person, or there's always this guilt ridden in it. With all of that in mind, from the secondary research, we needed to think about how the personality should be presented. And so one of the things was we didn't want it to be like someone's mother, nagging and making them feel guilty. That would be setting up for failure for us. We had to think about it from a perspective of sounding like someone's friend, a friend that's very encouraging, that you can look up to and is relatable to. And so what I did with some of the dialogue was whenever Olivia presented the spending, how much the user is spending in a certain area, Olivia would say don't worry, I've made similar mistakes before, but here's the way I was able to save money, and then introduce a tip accordingly like that. And then there's also the idea of social proof and authority too, where if the user is presented with the option of how much do other people spend in the spend category, then Olivia would point out some data from, based off the secondary research, like, Pew Research Center, Gallup polls, of how much how much the average user spends. So setting an anchor point of how much they are, how much the average person spends, so that they get a good idea of what they should aim for in the target.
And what did you ever think about if you presented this data and this is the first time they're seeing it? Let's say the average person spends $300 a month on groceries, but this particular user spends $1,000 a month. How do you preemptively prevent them from feeling guilty about it?
Like I said, it's really important to have a reassuring thing that don't worry, I've made similar mistakes before, and kind of building that relatability that you can get better at it through encouragement and not just scolding them that.
Would we consider it a mistake though if they're spending way above the average? Should we?
So, there's a lot of factors to really be considered. Sometimes the places where people live is one factor. And
so you take all of that into account too. Okay. Do you remember that Microsoft Word paperclip thing?
Yes, of course.
Why all the hate for it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's actually it's really funny because
to me, it's like a really early chatbot, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there have been chatbots way before, like with Alice and everything,
yeah.
but I would say it's probably the modern day version of the assistant that we're trying to form right now, the chatbot assistant. What I've actually read in the past was that they were intending to make a human-like experience, like an assistant-like experience. People tend to respond well. The idea of people tend to respond well to like a personification of like an object or anything, and so make it more human-like and everything. But they kind of ran with that. But the execution, well, it's gone. So. I feel like the biggest reason why it failed was that, one, the presentation of it was really annoying. Like, the way it kind of presents itself and says, "Hello, I'm Clippy, how may I help you?" And it's just lurking in the bottom right of your screen, in your line of vision. And it's like, what is it doing there? And why is it watching me? It makes the users feel really uncomfortable for that. And then the types of things it provides, like, help on, it's like, I could already do that myself. And I feel like the context of it, the fact that it was within a tool for creating things, as opposed to like a thing for a site where you're trying to get information about, I feel like that was a contributing factor into why it was kind of botched. Like the context of it just didn't really make any sense.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I get the idea it's trying to help, but I never really needed it. It seemed like a cute idea, but so where do you see chatbots going forward from now?
Yeah. So a bit about what I do right now, like in the conversational stage. So right now I actually work at a company called BMC Software. Okay. They're an enterprise software company. One of the goals that we have for chatbots in the enterprise space is to reduce the amount of traffic and loads call centers have when it comes to resolving technical issues. Where we see chatbots going in the future is that it's not about chatbots taking away jobs, but rather humans and chatbots working together and focusing on their respective strengths. For instance, humans, we're really good at improvisation and with uncertainty and being able to be flexible and accommodating to all the different things that happen. And we're also really good at critical thinking and also solving more complex problems with multiple moving parts. And additionally, we're also really good at being relatable with one another, empathy and all that stuff. That's our key strong points. Chatbots, on the other hand, they are better at focusing on a particular area and just automating that and just becoming better at it with time. And they're really good with basic mundane tasks like resetting a password or following a request or something like that. The chatbots can be able to handle the basic level issues while the humans can be able to focus on the more complex issues.
Do you think the chatbots wouldn't get to the level where they could solve more complex problems, or do we want it to go there?
Yeah, well,
that would be the fear of the actual call center workers.
I'm kind of conflicted about whether we should make AI at the level of where there's so much nuance between the AI and humans that it's too blurred to the point where it could either be to a fault or it could either be a blessing. With that being said, what I can say from a UX perspective is that we shouldn't be blindly optimistic about the capabilities of the AI and that the AI should just work by itself, because if you let it work by itself, you're going to have issues like with Facebook and how the algorithm presents things that people want and kind of shield people away. And then also the matter of, I guess, kind of being biased by itself unintentionally, just because of the information that is being fed by the users. Mm-hmm. The algorithm is only as good as the users that are interacting with it. The more information they feed into it, the more that they're always learning about the information, presenting information that they always know about.
And I would go maybe even one level deeper than that. It's only going to be as good as whoever put in the base code for it too.
Yeah. It requires being very proactive and always being involved in it, and not just code once and let it run forever. You got to actually constantly look at the data and look at ways to adjust the weights and everything, and also looking at the ways people are interacting with it. Making sure that users understand, feel well acquainted with the chatbots. Making sure that that it makes sense to the users, is solving the right problems, stuff like that.
Yeah, and probably setting the right expectations for the
Exactly.
user. That hey, maybe you can't do everything, and it's okay.
Exactly. Not only do I focus on the usability studies on the end user side of things with interacting with chatbots, but also on the how people currently build chatbots, so that we can get a better understanding of what is necessary when it comes to setting up chatbots with our own platforms. So I do a lot of
constraints that they're working around.
Exactly. So I've done a lot of user interviews / contextual inquiries in the past on that, and it's also been really, really interesting seeing the common patterns and flows people follow that they don't even realize they do.
Awesome.
I'll keep hammering this, but AI needs UX more than ever before, and not just in not just in the designs, but also in the research too. Everything from exploring the problems, the generative side, as well as the evaluative side too, to see which concepts work or not. And I feel like a lot of AI products fall into the trap of making the assumptions and just ship it mentality that really hurts their ability to get adopted properly. And I feel like with proper UX methodologies and actually testing out the concepts, we can actually make a lot more progress further and make sure that this technology gets adopted further.
Context and applications.
Of course. Making sure that they're solving the appropriate problems, and it's also
solving the right problems.
And the way it's solving the problems makes a big difference and doesn't defeat its own purpose and doesn't make the process more inefficient than necessary.
Yeah, that's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Cheenu, for your expertise and wisdoms on chatbots. I know you have a lot of work on this, so if you're interested in reading more, go follow Cheenu on Medium.
Yes.
I'll link his LinkedIn in the description below.
And also follow me on Instagram too, where I have a lot of stuff on UX and AI, as well as my own slice of life stuff too.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, awesome.
Thank you too.
Good chatting with you. It's lovely to be here in Austin to meet cool people like yourself.
Awesome. We always like to keep it weird, and we're always welcoming.
Awesome. And you'll see, you might see Cheenu again in future videos. So be on the lookout. Okay.
See you later. Until then, until next time.
Mad love. Peace.